Okay, it says I'm live. So let me make this big. How's everybody doing? I'm doing okay. I just prayed with my brothers and sisters in Christ, and everybody needs to pray over their food, especially if you're getting it from Ohio or from the surrounding areas. Pennsylvania, I'm not sure which all, okay? But we have troubling news. First, I'm going to play you what so I called in to the hotline number for the toxology for the city of Palestine. There was a number on one of the tweets. So I'll play that first and just listen carefully to the questions that I ask and what her responses are. And then I'm going to play you a video of Mike Adams, and he's talking to another expert about that same chemical and what happens to it when it goes through the fire. Let me know if you guys hear what they say this time. Okay, I'll just kind of put the sound right here. Can you hear me and the music both? Did I leave that message? Hi, Katrina. I have a question about these toxins that have been dispersed into the atmosphere.
Okay.
I've heard that vinyl chloride causes cancer. Is that true?
That is true. At sufficient concentrations over a long enough duration, it can cause an increased risk of cancer.
So if you're living in the 100-mile radius, how long would it take for that chemical to show up that you got cancer?
Based off of the air concentration data, I can only speak primarily to what's in the air, since I have access to that real-time data. We aren't seeing any elevations or detections of vinyl chloride in the community, so we would not expect an increased risk of cancer.
What about like when it rains, then it'll just come down, right?
As far as I know, vinyl chloride breaks down in the atmosphere after a few days. It transforms into I think hydrogen chloride as well as carbon dioxide. But I'm not the most well versed in atmospheric science.
Yeah.
So after a few days, especially it's been about a week or so since the burn off occurred, I wouldn't anticipate there to be much vinyl chloride in the atmosphere at this time.
Is that the one that's most concerning, or what would be the next most concerning out of the four?
Yeah. So out of the four, I believe, okay, let me pull up the list of the four. So we have vinyl chloride would be one because of its carcinogenic properties. The other would be, let me pull it up. Are you referencing like the EPA letter to Norfolk Southern?
The isobutylene and the ethyl.
Isobutylene, yeah.
Is that the next most dangerous?
I wouldn't rank isobutylene as like the next most dangerous. I believe the occupational exposure limit for isobutylene is relatively high. Let me take a look. It is in the it is in the 800 parts per million, so we would definitely be able to detect it with instrumentation if it were present in the environment at concentrations of concern. And then let me take a look at the other chemicals you might be looking at.
Ethyl hexyl.
Yeah, ethylene.
Yeah, and the ethylene glycol. Are there people that are keeping an eye on with the weather, like if it's going to rain on top of this huge cloud that can be seen from space?
I'm not. Is it still visible from space? I'm not certain of that.
I'm not either. I mean, it would be interesting to know the diameter of it too.
Yeah.
It seemed like it was massive.
I'm not sure about, the atmospheric coverage of where, the cloud or the burn-off release it covers, but, we are doing 24-hour monitoring around the clock in the community of East Palestine and, the greater area of East Palestine to monitor for these hazards. Our instrumentation is able to detect below concentrations that would be of concern, so that we would be, the team would be the first to know what's in the air, what's the present threat, even if there's changing atmospheric conditions, say with rain or various changes in wind direction or wind speed.
Are they going to be giving their reports to the public, or do they go
as far as
through?
I know, the data goes to Unified Command. Unified Command is staffed by federal and local agencies like the EPA, and I believe the EPA, if you Google EPA, East Palestine train derailment, they have a number of they provide daily updates as to what the air monitoring is like and showing, and it provides a number of documentations of the raw data collected by the EPA.
Have there been any tests as to mixing these chemicals together, either two or all four, to see what it would do?
I'm not certain. Yeah, I'm not certain if they performed that sort of testing yet. But we are, monitoring these individual constituents and considering the hazard, hazard posed as a whole.
Yeah, there's been a lot of these hazardous material explosions lately, I'm noticing.
Yeah.
It's pretty frightening to the whole world, because that could just go right over the ocean and, come down on some more sea life or islands, or I'm just wondering if they're notifying anybody that it's coming their way. Or how long does how long do these things stay up in the atmosphere?
Yeah, and unfortunately, I don't have that information.
You're just basically with humans, how it affects humans? Is that what?
My focus is primarily that environmental impact is important as well. My focus is on strategies for monitoring within the air. And, so far we have not seen any detections of vinyl chloride, phosgene, hydrogen chloride in the greater community.
How long would it take for that to show up?
It would be immediate. We would be able to detect it within the air immediately. So if there are changes in site conditions, we would be alerted immediately by, our real-time instrumentation. It can detect things in real time, and that's why we and the EPA perform both real-time air monitoring to get that instantaneous data,
right,
as well as analytical. So analytical, we sample over the duration of, say, 12, 24 hours, and that allows us to get to detection limits or concentrations detectable by instrumentation at a much lower concentration. So it can give us information as to what is in the air at much lower concentrations.
As far as the vinyl chloride goes, or the next dangerous one down, is there any way, if someone was exposed to that for several hours, that were like real close to the explosion? Is there a way for them to do some sort of detoxifying?
Most of the hazards present in the derailment are, besides vinyl chloride, have very, acute effects. You would notice a lot of respiratory irritation, etc. You would know that you were exposed to high concentrations. None of them linger for a long time in your body. Even vinyl chloride is detoxified from your body, if you are exposed to low concentrations within, I'd say, 20 hours.
Yeah, and then high concentrations, how long?
At high concentrations, it might take longer. It really depends on a person's liver function. But we haven't seen any data that would indicate that people are being exposed to high concentrations of vinyl chloride in the air.
I saw one guy from the meeting last night. Mm-hmm. He definitely was like he got a high dose. Hope that guy's okay. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you for your time and the information. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, not a problem. Have a good rest of your day.
Okay, you too. Okay, now we're going to get into what happens to that chemical. It turns into a dioxin. That's it. And it's TCDD. Also, I hear him say something about PBT, which actually is pretty... Anyway, I'm not gonna make things funny right now because this is most serious and we're in trouble. Wait till you hear this. All right, here we go, guys. I thought it was pretty interesting that her name was Katrina. Like the big bad hurricane.
So vinyl chloride, which I'm pointing at here, vinyl chloride, and for those on the radio, I'm showing a molecule of vinyl chloride. It contains hydrogen, carbon, and chlorine. That's it. Just those three elements. Vinyl chloride is what was on the trains. It's considered an industrial waste, but not an insanely toxic waste product. You can deal with vinyl chloride. You can, you can put it into tanker cars and you can deal with it. You can incinerate it somewhere else in a proper hazardous waste facility. That's what was on the trains. When they set fire to it, and I learned this from Eric Coppolino, who's going to be joining us. When they set fire to it, and I've confirmed this, I have EPA documents confirming this, they created this molecule in the fire, which is on the right. This is the most toxic molecule ever created by man. It's 2378 TCDD. It's one dioxin of a class of dioxins. And you'll notice that oxygens are inserted into the center of this molecule. It has the carbons, the hydrogens, and now chlorine on both ends. 4 chlorine atoms, and that creates armor. In essence, a chemical armor where this molecule is practically indestructible like Teflon. This molecule is a disruptor of every system in the human body.
So it doesn't break down like radiation?
It will not break down. It doesn't have a half-life like radiation. It is considered a persistent bioaccumulative toxin. That's called the PBT by the EPA.
PBT.
Persistent means it doesn't go away. Bioaccumulative means that it accumulates up the food chain. It falls on the grass. Grass is eaten by the cows, goes into the cow fat cells. It ends up in the milk, the cheese, the meat, the eggs, and so on. And then as a toxin, it interferes with everything. Fertility. It causes cancer. It causes spontaneous abortions, deformities. Because this, Alex, this gets unvaccinated people. Think about it. All the unvaccinated people, if you eat, you cannot avoid this if you're dealing with food that suffered the fallout. So just let me repeat. When they set fire to the vinyl chloride, they turned it into a chemical weapons factory that unleashed TCDD. And then they called this a controlled burn, which is a lie. It's not a controlled burn. It was a chemical factory, a chemical bomb on America, an act of ecological terrorism. And let me bring in Eric Coppolino. Mr. Coppolino, thank you for joining me again. I only met you recently. I interviewed him yesterday, and that's why I invited him on today. He knows what he's talking about. Mr. Coppolino, thank you for joining the show today.
Mike, thank you very much.
What I just said, do you concur with that? Do you have anything to add to that? Did I say anything incorrect from your view? What would you like to say?
Impeccably accurate. Every word, your entire assessment is spot on. If I could add a little bit more to the incident on the train, first of all, there were in fact 5 cars of polyvinyl chloride, 4 cars of PVC pellets, and 5 of vinyl chloride monomer. And they all burned or were burned. And the problem with that is that, among many, many, many problems, is that they were burning in the presence of other fires in cars containing things like wheat and metal and frozen vegetables. And so when other substances burn in the presence of any chlorine fire, this increases the amount of dioxin because you're making the hydrocarbons available as well as the chlorines available. So even a little bit of chlorine in a big any hydrocarbon fire will produce the dioxins. So this is by far, look, this is not really measurable, but I know most of the history of dioxin going back, and I'm going to talk about that history in a moment because I've got a 1956 Monsanto document. But I can't think of a worse dioxin release than this one.
This is, I mean, you and I both are calling for the total evacuation of East Palestine
Yes.
right now. It should happen immediately. And if it does not happen, Eric, what are we looking at in terms of children that are going to be born over the next several years? Because I've read in studies that this will alter pregnancies in a mother 20 years after exposure. What are we looking at in the next 2 years?
Well, even if it's not evacuated, even if it is evacuated, we have a problem because the people have been exposed to so much there, and most of them don't really understand the peril that they're in. They do not really understand the nature of this chemical. But we're looking at multi-generational effects. We're looking at women who cannot have children, and we're looking at spontaneous abortions, pretty much in everyone who's pregnant now, and potentially everyone who becomes pregnant. Carol Van Strum, my teacher and document source, who provided me with this document, we spoke to the people of East Palestine last night in a Zoom call, and Carol described a situation in her community which was sprayed with Agent Orange in the 60s and 70s after it was banned in Vietnam, and there has not been a single baby born in this valley for 50 years.
Unreal. I mean, this is.
Zero
Would it be going
babies.
too far to describe this as a depopulation weapon, or at least a depopulation effect? Whether you think it's intentional or accidental, the effect is depopulation, is it not?
Yeah, it's depopulation, and it's disrupting the biological processes in the lives of many people. We're all living with a level of hormone pollution. I mean, this is going to add to an already very serious hormone pollution problem. We worry about why there's all these weird things going on with sex and gender. And though this is not politically correct to say, we're living in a world that is completely soaked in endocrine disrupting chemicals. And in terms of intent, Mike, the word intent means knew or should have known. Intent does not mean the desire to make something happen. In other words, if a jury has the option of finding someone guilty of an intentional tort, they don't have to have wanted the thing to happen. They only needed to know or should know that it could happen, and that is certainly the case here. And I think there is an absolute act of intent, and I don't know what Governor DeWine knew when he signed off on dumping between 1 and 5 carloads of this stuff, but the governor of Ohio agreed to this.
That's
according to the Cincinnati Enquirer, quotes in the Cincinnati Enquirer, he was consulted and he ordered an evacuation of the area, and they torched 5 tanker cars full of vinyl chloride. I mean, I cannot imagine a worse thing. I mean, this is going to be like testing a nuclear bomb in Yonkers.
Eric, and then they lied and they said it's a controlled burn. Now, a controlled burn is supposed to apply to forest fires where you burn a fire break so that the fire doesn't spread. When you take vinyl chloride or PVC and you throw it in a ditch and you set it on fire, according to the EPA, it will produce massive amounts of dioxins. And I'm on archive.epa.gov. You can look up their dioxin information. It says studies have shown that only small amounts of chlorinated materials, so that's the vinyl chloride, polyvinyl chloride, only small amounts of these materials will result in the formation of dioxins when burning. We'll be right back with more with Eric Coppolino. This is Mike Adams here and Alex Jones on Infowars.com. We'll be right back after this break.
But when I look at FEMA running a drill 2 weeks before, right through to the day it happened of putting bracelets on for an emergency and all of this, and they have this perfect train loaded with all these perfect things to cause this, and then Biden won't go there, he won't get federal support. I mean, this is smoking gun, because if you study the globalists, they always run drills for real attacks. In case their people get caught running the attack, they say, oh, it's part of the drill. Just like 9/11, just like so many other events. So to me, the drill for this FEMA ID, for FEMA slavery, is just really, really a bellwether.
It has every marker of being planned and as part of a nationwide sabotage and chemical spill operation. So it's not just shutting down the food infrastructure, energy infrastructure. It's about blowing up chemical plants. I mean, there have been dozens actually this year.
Wall Street Journal confirms attacks on power plants, power structures, food processing, chemical plants, off the chart.
And what we need to understand about this attack in particular is how extremely low concentrations of this molecule are insanely toxic. We're going to bring back in Mr. Coppolino.
That's right. I heard your guest say he read the governor in a news article. I saw the governor on Fox News admit he was advised by the chemist, by FEMA, by the experts to set it on fire, and he did it. So, yeah, the governor admits it, but they knew what they were doing.
They should have known if they didn't. But I think you're right. I think they did. But understand, compared to glyphosate, I mean, glyphosate is a Boy Scout compared to dioxins, okay? Heavy metals, lead, mercury, arsenic.
So tens of millions dead glyphosate is nothing compared to that.
Nothing compared to dioxins. This can be toxic at what's called femtograms. A femtogram is 1/1,000,000th of a billionth of a gram. I mean, we're talking nanograms and then picograms.
So this kills any tissue it comes in contact with.
Well, it doesn't kill the tissue. It interferes with all normal physiological functions. So it's soluble with lipids in the body. So it interferes with everything, the endocrine system, the cardiovascular system, the neurological.
The hormones are attacking.
The hormones. And we're talking about in your blood, it could be at parts per trillion or lower.
Wow.
There's no safe dose, which means that every surface in East Palestine and probably for 1,000 square miles around there, every surface is contaminated and will be.
Guys, roll the video of doves, hundreds of doves, all of them dying, hanging by their feet and falling 20 miles from the event. And then let's go back to your guest.
Yes, let's bring in, again, Eric Coppolino. And if you want to go to his Substack site, by the way, it's planetwaves.org. And he has a really great resource there on dioxins. Mr. Coppolino, thank you again for joining us. We appreciate you. We've been just...
Yeah, what about the premeditation? And then just you got the floor, but this looks premeditated.
Well, is that addressed to me, Alex?
Yes, sir.
So apart from the premeditation potential of this, and to me, by the way, the drill is always the key to premeditation. So I need to look into that. But let's go back to a 1956 Monsanto document. Can we see this?
Yeah, we'll punch that up. Go ahead.
There you go. So, yeah. Oh my God, I've got my screen blur on.
Yeah, you got the screen blur, but we can...
Is there a way to get rid of that fast?
We don't mind seeing your background. Yeah, it's fine.
You'll trust that, and I can provide this document to you.
If you just tell us the name of the document, my crew can pull it up.
Yeah, it's in Document Cloud. I'll send you a link. It's in a kind of obscure place. But in any event, it's a 1956 Monsanto document, which is attempting, and it's fairly long. I mean, it's about 10 pages long, includes meeting minutes, and it's attempting to reconcile the fact that they had these very unusual toxic effects in 1949 from an incident that turned out to be dioxin. Then they had similar effects in Germany when a plant blew up in 1953, and they knew everything they needed to know about these chemicals as at their own admission by 1956, they knew everything that it was going to be contaminated in. This document takes you back through time, and they look back at all the Agent Orange components, and they admit that it's in there. And then they turn around and they spray Agent Orange, which was, dioxin's, one of dioxin's most infamous moments. And that's where most of you know about this, because if any of you are related to a Vietnam vet.
No deformities in our family history. 2 deformities in my uncle that was a helicopter gun pilot on a Cobra protecting the spraying of it. 2 deformed children out of 4.
Yep. And 3 generations. Dow Chemical knew in the 1970s this would go 3 generations.
3
in a rat study
generations.
that the EPA conspired with Dow to cover up. Now, the problem with the EPA is that they always conspire with the companies to cover up their crimes. They act almost like a public relations agency or a buffer to the companies to keep the companies in business. And this just has been the role of the EPA and the FDA since the beginning.
And by the way, the exposure of these dioxins causes aggressive behavior in children. It causes deformities, both neurological and behavioral deformities.
But it's directly linked like lead to crime.
Well, yeah, but again, at concentrations that are literally 1 billion times smaller. So there's no way to get rid of this. Now, we have to.
So they want an angrier world, Klaus Schwab talks about.
And this feeds right into infertility, spontaneous abortions, and also lack of sperm motility in men. It's like the worst nightmare chemical, right, Eric? I mean, everything that you've seen in your research. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's the worst. It's the toxin by which all others are. I've taken my blur off. You cannot see my my.
Sure. So by accident,
so
the Ace of Spades, the King Daddy, has been released. That's not an accident.
1956,
I'll share this
Monsanto.
document with you, Alex. It is really impressive to read how much Monsanto knew, how long before they started dumping this entire chemical on the millions of men who served in Vietnam, the Vietnamese people, and then when it was banned in Vietnam, they sprayed it on the forests of the Pacific Northwest. So this war has been going on for a very long time. Dioxin is the perfect chemical weapon. It is a war against the people throughout the history of dioxin, right up to the present day.
So basically, Super Agent Orange is bombing the Northeast right now.
Exactly.
Yeah, basically, yeah. It was almost like exploding an Agent Orange factory in East Palestine, Ohio. And this is why I am calling for the evacuation of East Palestine until there can be absolutely honest, comprehensive tests for dioxins, dibenzofurans, and all other known degradation products.
Well, what's happening to these birds? Because there's videos of animals dying everywhere. Just hundreds of birds falling out of the sky, dying. Well, what's going on? Hanging by their feet like bats.
Very toxic. It's Silent Spring. I mean, this was what happened in Silent Spring, the book that got DDT banned. People are saying that their bird feeders have no birds. Of course, they don't have any birds. This stuff is unbelievably toxic to wildlife, to small children, to pregnant women. It will sterilize all women of childbearing age. And that's why they must leave. Take your dogs and cats with you. And then we have to pressure the EPA to get independent, honest testing for dioxins and furans.
Eric, and along those lines, before we run out of time, Alex, our lab is investing in a dioxin interface for equipment. I'll talk to you more about that off air. We're going to be able to do independent testing. Secondly, let me go through the list of PubMed published studies that talk about nutrients that can help eliminate this just real quickly. Catechins from green tea. This is all National Library of Medicine publications. Black tea, effects of green vegetables, chlorophyll, chlorella, seaweed, green matcha tea. And this all eliminates dioxins in laboratory studies. It eliminates it from breast milk so that you can breastfeed your babies. There's something called dried bonito broth, which is known in Japan, that's been able to help children that have been exposed to dioxins. Folks, we know about indole-3 carbinol.
So for any enemy attack, God gave us something.
Exactly. But you have to have the knowledge. You have to understand nutrition and superfoods and supplements, or grow your own sprouts, grow broccoli sprouts, make your own indole-3 carbinol, eat cruciferous vegetables, grow your own vegetables. You can detox from this. You can survive. This is a multi-billion-dollar economic destruction. And by the way, the agricultural output of the state of Ohio is something like $3.8 billion a year.
Sure. Well, no wonder Booty Judge won't get near this.
Of course. They can't admit it. This is the biggest cover-up in the history, at least ecological cover-up in the history of our country. And the number of parties that are complicit in this include the media. You realize that today here, folks, with Eric Coppolino, myself, and Alex Jones, we are the pro-environment wing of America. We are pro-environment. We're trying to tell the truth. The media is covering it up. I mean, here we are sounding the alarm and trying to save lives and trying to save future generations and trying to save farms.
But because it's the Midwest, the left's making jokes about it.
It's not funny, and this food is going to be distributed all over the place. You're having dinner in New York City right now. You're eating food grown in Pennsylvania, Kentucky, and Ohio, and New York State. So you can't poison part of the planet. Now, I wanted to say, if anyone in East Palestine is listening, got to get people out of there, and those who stay behind must demand dioxin and furan testing. There's a big meeting with Aaron Brockovich on Friday night. The issue of dioxin testing must come up. I contacted Aaron last night. There have to be split samples. The samples cannot go to one lab. Now, when and there's no way that anyone can do dioxin testing and come back with a no detect level. That's why they're not going to test. But to get accurate levels, there have to be multiple labs working on this testing process, and not paid for by the railroad.
There's the key, and also not the EPA, because the EPA has been lying to us from the very beginning, and also the Secretary of Transportation, Buttigieg. I mean, totally incompetent.
We've committed nearly 700 tanks and thousands of armored vehicles, 1,000 artillery systems, more than 2 million rounds of artillery ammunition, more than 50 advanced launch rocket systems, anti-ship and air defense systems, all defend Ukraine, and that doesn't count the other $500 million we're announcing today and tomorrow. That's going to be coming your way.
I had to throw that in.
And that's just the United States in this piece.
Can anyone see how dark?
I had to throw that in because he left and went to Ukraine on President's Day, didn't give any funding to East Palestine. Tucker goes into it, and then I just got like a couple of more clips that are important that have to do with this, and then Kate sent me something about that people are having problems with like some sort of skin issues, like eating flesh or something. I haven't looked at it yet. And then, the acid rain and everything. So it's we haven't heard the first of this yet. It's going to be ongoing, and what a nightmare. And if they cover this up, then there's no, well, I'm not going to say there's no hope, but it sure would be a stain, on all social media that would cover up such a thing. I hope they don't.
And crazy this is? Truly crazy? Yes, many Americans can see how dark and crazy it is. Look at the numbers. How many Americans support this war for democracy that Americans for some reason can't vote on? Why don't we have a national referendum on all this? As long as we're leveling a country on behalf of democracy, it might be nice to try democracy here, but no. It's all so grotesque. It defies imagination, really. But imagine if you were watching all of this, the spectacle from your home in East Palestine, Ohio, a home that is still stinking of chemicals you can't identify. So here you have the President of the United States personally visiting a corrupt foreign autocrat to announce $500 million more in your tax dollars to go to Ukraine. Meanwhile, you, stuck in some lost and forgotten part of Ohio, the state that helped build this country, have a mushroom cloud over your city. The animals are dying, the water is glowing. And yet for more than 2 weeks after all of this started with the famous train derailment, FEMA and the Biden administration have refused to provide any kind of financial assistance to you.
I heard that this thing was on fire for 4 days. Did you guys hear that? That this controlled burn, so-called controlled burn, it was going on for 4 whole days?
East Palestine still hasn't even gotten a visit, a token visit from Joe Biden's token transportation secretary, Mayor Pete. And after 2 weeks, people in East Palestine
Okay. And this is okay. This is the guy from the news. I'm not sure what his news channel was. News Week or something. He might say he got arrested for going in this building. I don't know, like if he caused a disturbance or anything, but.
These are your rights. I am allowed to be here. Did you not see that man put his hands on it down and continued on? Go. Now. Or you can go to jail. Sir. You want to go to jail for criminal trespassing? Do you want to go to jail for criminal trespassing? Do you understand how quickly our lawyers will get me out? I don't care. Sir, can we? I don't care. Go. Out the doors. Out the doors. Out the doors. By other media right here. I'm going to listen. I don't care. You're going to walk out the door. I'm going to listen. You're going to walk out the door. Come on out, sir. You're going to walk out the door, or you're going to jail. Do not touch me. Sir, can we talk outside, please? I am trying to listen. Outside, please. And he escalated with me. I am doing my job. I'm discovered by the First Amendment. Excuse me, sir. I'm the building supervisor here. Please leave. There you have it. You're going to stand outside. You all, or you're going to jail. Let's go. Let's go. You're under arrest. Under arrest. Sir.
Can you believe that?
This is bad. Stop. I am on the ground. What are you trying to do? Stop resisting. Stop. You are under arrest. Oh my God. Stop. You want to get this. Resist. I will resist. Put your hands on your flat. Lay flat, please. You guys, he's a national correspondent. You cannot do this. I'm a reporter with News Nation. It's all being recorded right now.
News Nation. And who's the ones that should be getting under arrest? The ones that came up with the idea that it was a good idea to do this? Maybe those people should be under arrest.
Excessive force, because you can't talk to people about doing their jobs.
Oh my God, I cannot believe this.
What's that?
This is horrible.
This is what it's like to be a black reporter in 2023.
Evan, I'm so sorry. Evan, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Sia.
Pull over, sir. Just get up on your butt.
Can you please loosen this?
We will. Can you stand up?
That one was a little tight, so we are.
Oh my God.
Oops. Oh, shoot.
So by accident,
I messed up. Hold on.
Must demand
States.
Personally, I don't care. Sorry, can we? There you have it.
Lay flat.
Can you please loosen this?
We will. Can you stand up?
That one was a little tight, so we are.
Oh my God.
Thank you very much.
This is horrible.
Can someone help me?
Evan, I'm sorry. Oh my God.
Shame. Okay.
So I walked up to the cage, and this is what I
chickens.
found.
Amanda Brashears was going to feed her 5 hens and rooster this morning when she discovered them all lifeless, practically in the same position, with no signs of a predator entering their enclosure.
I'm beyond upset and quite panicked because they may be just chickens, but they're family.
Brashears says her chickens were alive and well yesterday. She believes the smell following the detonation of the train carrying chemicals that derailed in East Palestine is to blame for her birds' sudden death.
My video camera footage shows my chickens were perfectly fine before they started this burn. And as soon as they started the burn, my chickens slowed down and they died. If it can do this to chickens in one night, imagine what it's going to do to us in 20 years. So I walked up to the cage, and this is what I found.
Amanda Brashears.
There's chaos on the ground, too, a lot of it. 10 days ago, for example, a train derailed in East Palestine, Ohio. That's about 50 minutes outside Pittsburgh. Apparently, there was some kind of mechanical failure. We still don't have details on what that failure was. Of course we don't. We do know about 50 cars derailed. At least 10 of them were carrying thousands of gallons of highly dangerous chemicals, including vinyl chloride, which causes cancer. Watch.
It started with a thunderous boom, then a huge plume of thick black smoke that could be seen for miles. This was the moment officials in East Palestine, Ohio had been planning for, a controlled release of toxic chemicals from several train cars at the site of a derailment, one that has forced thousands from their homes.
And all the way around, everybody's frustrated and like to go home.
The decision to conduct a controlled release came just days after the train derailed in the rural Ohio community, sparking a massive fire. As the blaze continued to burn through the weekend, concerns quickly escalated. That's because 5 of the train cars carried the chemical vinyl chloride, an unstable material with the potential to explode, shooting deadly shrapnel up to a mile away and releasing toxic fumes into the air.
We don't want to second guess anybody. We got to assume everybody involved was doing their best under a highly stressful situation. But did you see that mushroom cloud? That was caused on purpose. And maybe there's a good reason. Again, no second guessing. But what it means is those clouds of toxic smoke flew up and out. And that toxic smoke almost immediately began killing animals. Dead fish washed up on shore. As one hazardous materials specialist put it, we basically nuked a town with chemicals. So then representatives from the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, arrived to restore calm. Yes, an EPA spokesman explained, chemicals from the derailed train did enter the local watershed, and yes, they did kill fish. But the drinking water supply remains totally safe. The fish are dead, but go ahead and fill your thermos and brew some coffee. Everything's fine. Now, we don't know if the locals in East Palestine are drinking the water tonight, but we can tell you the Biden administration doesn't seem too concerned about it either way. Donald Trump got over 71% of the vote in the county in the last presidential election. That's not exactly the Democratic Party's core demographic. Fentanyl, toxic waste spill, whatever. They're not our voters. And by the way, what does a chemical spill have to do with climate change? If you can't use it to sell solar panels, it's not really an environmental disaster. That's the rule in Washington. So no one in the Biden administration bothered to issue warnings to communities that might be in the path of those toxic mushroom clouds you saw floating up from the train wreck, because no one cared enough to do that. Pete Buttigieg is the official who's supposed to be in charge of our transportation infrastructure. Technically, he's the transportation secretary. At an appearance today, he seemed to have no idea that there was a train derailment in East Palestine, Ohio.
Oh my gosh.
His real concern, he explained, is that we have too many damn white construction workers in this country.
We have heard way too many stories from generations past of infrastructure where you got a neighborhood, often a neighborhood of color, that finally sees the project come to them, but everyone in the hard hats on that project looking like, doing the good paying jobs, don't look like they came from anywhere near the neighborhood.
Yeah, that's the problem, Mayor Pete. Too many white guys in hard hats. Why didn't we realize this before we built all this infrastructure that's now crumbling? It's actually not funny, and future historians will marvel at just how much damage one incompetent narcissist can cause when he's elevated to a serious job, like transportation secretary. Here's a guy who could not on a bet, who could not at gunpoint change his own tire, who oversees our roads, railways, and airports, all of which are crumbling from mismanagement and neglect. And not just from mismanagement and neglect, but also from actual acts of sabotage. Over the last 2 years, the FBI has investigated more than 40 cases of rail sabotage in Washington state alone.
40 in Washington.
Now, a lot of those attacks involve so-called shunt devices. Those are wires stretched between tracks that interfere with the train's electrical signals and cause derailments. In one incident, just before Christmas in 2020, a shunt caused a train to derail in Custer, Washington. That train spilled 30,000 gallons of crude oil and forced locals to evacuate their homes. Well, that's not the environmental disaster that Joe Biden talks about, because, of course, he can't buy solar panels from the Chinese to fix it. But it was, objectively speaking, an act of terrorism. The interesting thing is, very often, in fact, in the majority of cases, people who commit acts of terrorism against infrastructure, whoever they are never punished. And the ones who are caught aren't really punished. One woman who tried to destroy trains using a shunt got out of jail after only a year. Oh. So no one's paying any attention and no one really seems to care, because what does that have to do with environmental racism and climate? And possibly as a result of that attitude, there are an awful lot of train derailments in this country, many more than you may realize. In the last calendar year, more than 1,000 trains went off the tracks in the United States.
1,000?
How's that for a metaphor? Just today, 2 more trains derailed. One of them was in South Carolina and one was in Texas near Houston. The train near Houston was also carrying hazardous materials, as so many trains are. What's going on here exactly? We're not even going to guess. But we can tell you the chaos is not limited to our rail system. There have also been many recent attacks on our power grid. Very few of those attacks have been widely reported. Last year, there were more than 100 attacks of them in the United States, attacks on our power grid. In North Carolina this winter, for example, nearly 50,000 people lost their power in freezing temperatures when somebody shot up 2 energy substations. And so on. Why is it not a big story? Oh, it's not a story at all. And then, of course, at the same time, we've also seen a series of bizarre accidents befalling the food industry, threatening our food supply. That would include unexplained fires and plane crashes in processing plants, to chicken feed that seems to stop egg production. Boy, next they'll be coming for the water. Oh, wait, they are. Less than a month into the Biden administration was also a highly sophisticated attack on the water supply outside Tampa.
Pinellas County Sheriff Bob Galtieri says a water treatment plant operator first noticed the remote access hack. The bad actor increased the amount of sodium hydroxide, or lye, in the water supply from 100 parts per million to more than 11,000. For the 15,000 residents of Oldsmar, Florida, the increase of sodium hydroxide in the water supply could have caused vomiting, chest, and abdominal pain.
This type of activity and this type of hacking of critical infrastructure is not necessarily limited to just water supply systems. It can be anything.
Oh, an attack on our water supply. That's weird. I didn't read that in the New York Times. But what's interesting, not to connect the dots or anything, that was not the only attack on our water supply that year. In January 2021, there was a similar effort to poison the water treatment plant that serves the San Francisco Bay Area. An unidentified hacker accessed the facility's computers remotely. According to NBC, quote, after logging in, the hacker deleted programs that the water plant used to treat drinking water. Now, fortunately, in this case, somebody noticed it. The next day, the attack was discovered and those programs were reinstalled, so nobody got poisoned. But they kept trying. There were similar hacks of water treatment facilities in California in August of 2021. There was one in Maine in July of 2021. There was one in Pennsylvania in May of 2021. In Nevada in March. In New Jersey in September of 2020. In Kansas in March of 2019. And so on. So who's looking after our water supply? Water, that's kind of basic. Well, that's the job of the EPA. But what does protecting the water have to do with passing out cash in the name of remediating environmental racism? Oh, nothing! So they're not paying attention. In fact, they're not paying attention to such an extent that even the Washington Post, which is a shill for the administration if there ever was one, pointed out that, quote, for more than 2 decades, the EPA has not been resourced or organized to secure the nation's water and wastewater sector against physical and cyber threats. Wait a second. So nobody's paying attention to the most critical infrastructure, not the racist roads, but food, water, energy, transportation infrastructure, food, water, energy infrastructure. What does that add up to? Oh, that adds up to a country. You can't have a country without those things. And in every single case, whatever the cause, our food, water, energy, and infrastructure are being degraded. Who knows why? If you didn't know any better, you think there might be a war going on.
That's what I've got, you guys. We're being poisoned. So pray over your food and get close to Jesus, because we're all gonna die. No, seriously, we are gonna die. It's just how soon are we gonna die? I don't know. Maybe God protects us. Maybe it's like the children of Israel with the shoes, that never wear out. So just trust and obey, because there's no other way to be happy in Jesus but to trust and obey, and you'll be blessed. And thank you all for watching. I know it's heavy, but hopefully this will all stay good, if you know what I mean. And I appreciate you watching with me. I love you all. See you on 22223. Tomorrow is 22323. So I'm going to do a show tomorrow for 22323. Love you all. Good night.